The time has come. Let's go now. We need to leave the house without being noticed. This is so exciting. Let's have some fun while everyone else is asleep. The night before our wedding, my fiancé Sebastian slipped out of the house with a woman. I was tailing him. Checking my phone, I saw it was 3 a.m. The only sounds in the deserted park were insects chirping, but soon I could hear Sebastian's embarrassing conversation with the woman. Gradually, their conversation dwindled and turned into heavy breathing. I could have stopped their affair at this point. But I chose not to. All I wanted was for him to feel a lifelong regret. I started recording them secretly from the shadows. My silent revenge beginning as I suppressed my explosive anger. On the wedding day, I stood silently in front of the closed doors. Beyond them were the faces of people smiling and celebrating our new journey. Imagining the expression Sebastian would have in front of them made me smirk. Standing next to me, oblivious to my thoughts, Sebastian smiled and said, "Finally, the day has come. Let's be happy together." His words made goosebumps rise on my arms. Because they echoed what he had said when sneaking out with the woman. I forced a smile to avoid suspicion. And calmly replied, "Yes, it has." My voice trembled slightly, but it went unnoticed. Sebastian continued to smile, showing no sign of doubt. We were both performing brilliantly, hiding our true feelings behind empty words and smiles. Though engaged, Sebastian and I hadn't officially registered our marriage. He worked at his parents' company, which had faced financial difficulties around the time of our engagement. We decided to register the marriage after the company stabilized. This hardship made the wedding even more special for him. His face was flushed with excitement, constantly adjusting his collar and touching his outfit, eager for the ceremony to start. Unfortunately, I was about to plunge him into despair, turning his excited face pale. If only he hadn't done what he did, we could have had the perfect wedding. But there's no point in thinking about that now. I know everything. And there's no turning back. Reaffirming my resolve for revenge, I clenched my fist tightly. Finally, the moment arrived. When it was time to enter, Sebastian, with a determined look, said, "Shall we go?" There's no point in trying to act cool. I almost laughed at his attempt to look cool but managed to hold it in. And then, I straightened my back and looked straight ahead. The doors opened, and the entrance music started. This was the signal for my revenge to begin. "What? What is this?" Sebastian was visibly panicking. Seeing this, I smirked again. This time openly in front of him. Actually, I had switched the music that was supposed to play during our entrance. What was playing now was the conversation between Sebastian and his mistress in the park restroom. The embarrassing audio echoed through the venue, a far cry from the solemn atmosphere it was supposed to have. Sebastian, expecting a song filled with joy, was undoubtedly shocked. So were the guests. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, mouths gaping. Gasps, small screams, and confused murmurs like "What? What's going on?" rose from all around. My smile grew wider. Realizing this, Sebastian's face turned pale as he approached me. "Hey! What did you do? You planned this, didn't you?" He reached out to grab me but stopped, perhaps mindful of my wedding dress. He gritted his teeth and glared at me with sharp eyes. "Please, stop this! Everyone is listening!" He cried out desperately, but I had no intention of stopping. "What are you talking about? There's no need to stop." Sebastian's eyes widened in disbelief, staring at me. "You looked like you were having a lot of fun. You don't feel embarrassed, right? That's why I'm playing this. That's why I'm playing it for everyone to hear." At my words, Sebastian's eyes flared with anger. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't do this. Are you the one to say that?" Anger welled up inside me. If he hadn't cheated, there wouldn't be any recording, and it wouldn't be played in front of the guests. Doesn't cheating count as something you shouldn't do for him? Suppressing my urge to shout, I turned my face away. I picked up the microphone and looked at the dumbfounded faces of the guests. Their mouths were agape, waiting to hear what I would say next. I took a deep breath and began to speak the truth in front of them. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the shock. Starting with an apology. The guests seemed to realize that I had switched the entrance music. It was as if time had resumed, and they blinked and turned their heads, whispering to each other. What? What's going on? Why would she do something like this? I could hear those murmurs reaching my ears. To clear up the confusion, I spoke up. I am not marrying Sebastian. At that moment, the room erupted in whispers and gasps. Words like what and what's going on filled the air. The chaotic mix of shocked voices and Sebastian's embarrassing conversation created an atmosphere of utter chaos. However, the guests seemed to become more focused on my words rather than the switched entrance music. It was Sebastian's shout of "Don't mess with me" that silenced the room. Looking in his direction, I saw him clenching his fists and glaring at me, shoulders tense with anger. Next to him stood a woman I recognized immediately. She had the same angry expression, glaring at me as well. She was Sebastian's mistress. "This is your fault, your fault," she repeated, striding toward me with the sound of her heels echoing. "What did you do?" "This." Sebastian, joining her, reached out toward me again, no longer caring about my dress. His anger was palpable. There was a scream from the guests, thinking he might hit me. But his hand never touched me, not even his fingertips. "Sebastian, stop it." His parents intervened. His father stood protectively in front of me, and his mother gently pulled me back, her hand on my shoulder. Both of them glared sharply at Sebastian. "Dad! Mom!" He looked stunned, his eyes wide in disbelief. But it only lasted a moment. A few seconds later, he started glaring at me and his parents alternately. "What the hell? Why are you siding with her? I haven't done anything wrong. You don't believe your own son?" His angry voice echoed through the hall. The tension was palpable, but his parents didn't flinch. Despite being taller than both of them, Sebastian seemed smaller in comparison. His parents stood firm, creating a standoff. They were glaring at each other in silence, sparks flying. The first to break was Sebastian. His face gradually showed signs of panic, his gaze wandering. "Why won't you say anything? Don't you believe me? I didn't cheat. The BGM playing now is something Ava fabricated. Please, believe me," he pleaded, looking desperately at his parents. But their expressions didn't change. His father sighed deeply and put his hand to his forehead, clearly exasperated. His mother closed her eyes tightly, looking pained. "Think about it. Do you really believe that I would cheat?" Why was Sebastian trying so hard to deny everything? He was serious about his work and had worked tirelessly to turn around a failing company. People at the company viewed him as diligent and hardworking. I have a sister named Riley who worked at the same company as Sebastian, so even though I worked at a different company, I heard about his work ethic. Because of his good reputation, he believed that if he kept saying, "I would never cheat," people would believe him. "Come on, right? Dad, Mom, do I look like someone who would cheat?" Sebastian's eyes were wide with desperation. Bloodshot, showing just how desperate he was. Of course, his parents must have found it hard to believe at first. No, they didn't want to believe it. But now they couldn't be fooled. Because they were the first to notice his affair. When his father told him this in a calm tone, Sebastian gasped. If it had only been me who knew the truth, he might have been able to talk his way out, but with his parents also knowing, he realized he couldn't escape. Sebastian's parents discovered the affair through their pet camera at home. It had accidentally captured footage of Sebastian and the woman together. The video evidence was undeniable. His mistress, standing next to him like a statue, blushed with embarrassment, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. "We noticed your affair and told Ava," his mother said with a sigh. her voice heavy with sadness and anger. After being informed by his parents, I also started monitoring Sebastian with the pet camera, eventually witnessing the affair firsthand. The memory of that moment was seared into my mind. The sensations of my racing heart, the goosebumps on my arms and back, and my ragged, despair-filled breathing still vivid. No way, being watched by a pet camera. Realizing everything was exposed, Sebastian was stunned, his eyes vacant as his body slumped. The hand that had been halfway to grabbing me now hung limply by his side, like a puppet with its strings cut. The revelation from his parents was so shocking that he stood there, wide-eyed, staring at them as if he couldn't see anything else. His back slowly hunched, and it looked like he might collapse to the floor at any moment. His legs trembled visibly, unsteady. I thought absent-mindedly that even a slight push might knock him over. Ignoring Sebastian, I walked over to his mistress. She too had a distant look, but when I approached, she snapped back to reality and looked up at me. Looking into her face brought back old memories. Neighbors used to say, "You two look so alike, especially around the eyes." How cute. Sis, you can't deny it anymore. Yes, the mistress was my sister, Riley. She glared at me with eyes full of frustration and anger, biting her lower lip. There wasn't a hint of guilt for cheating. The murmurs from the guests grew louder upon hearing me call her sis. What? She took her sister's fiancé? Wow. That's the worst. The only ones who remained calm were Sebastian's parents. They had recognized Riley from the pet camera footage. Our parents died when we were young, and Riley raised me like a parent. If you ever have any problems, talk to me right away, she had once said with a bright smile. Her support had been a lifeline during the dark days after our parents' deaths. But that supportive, kind sister was gone. Her current expression bore no trace of that old smile. It was like light and darkness, good and evil, completely opposite directions. I still couldn't believe she had an affair with Sebastian. She had always been my unwavering ally, so the idea of betrayal never crossed my mind. I voiced my thoughts. Why did you cheat? Riley snorted in response, no longer embarrassed by being caught. I loved him before you got engaged. She said she admired his dedication at work. Her professional admiration turned into romantic feelings over time. I liked him first, but you. Riley's shoulders shook with anger. She had worked hard to raise me, and there had been love in that effort. But watching me grow closer to Sebastian made that love vanish, replaced by anger, hatred, and frustration, dark, negative emotions. You took the man I loved. That's why I decided to take Sebastian from you out of spite. Her scream left me speechless. I had no idea she liked Sebastian. When I talked about him, she had smiled and said, I think you and Sebastian make a great couple. I never guessed her true feelings were the opposite. As I stood there, unable to speak, Riley continued her cold tirade. It's your fault. You seduced Sebastian. After everything I did for you, raising you like a parent, you repay me with this betrayal. You deserve this. Just as I was about to speak, Sebastian's parents stepped forward. Ava did nothing wrong. No matter the reason, cheating is never acceptable. That's right, Ava is your only family, isn't she? How could you do something so betraying? Their strong words made my chest swell with warmth. I always thought Riley was wrong, but a small part of me wondered if I was at fault for falling in love with Sebastian. My in-laws' words dispelled those doubts. But Riley didn't listen at all. She showed no remorse, smirking at me with a twisted smile. Sebastian never loved you. He only loves me. She turned to Sebastian for confirmation. He said, yeah, but his smile was awkward, and there was a slight pause before he answered, which I didn't miss. Riley, oblivious, continued gleefully. Do you know the real reason Sebastian wanted to marry you? To use you as a housekeeper. Being his wife is just a title. These were the words Sebastian had said to Riley behind my back. I could easily imagine him saying this with the same sneering smile Riley had now. He was always going to marry me eventually. You were just going to be thrown away. No one could ever love someone like you. Don't flatter yourself. I was completely exasperated by Riley's non-stop talking, exchanging glances with my in-laws and shrugging. She thought she was throwing knives at me, but her words had no impact. Riley had asked me if I knew, but she was the one who didn't know. Sebastian had hidden something from her. And I opened my mouth to reveal it. Sis, didn't you know? Huh? Know what? Sebastian had other mistresses besides you. Sebastian's body jerked exaggeratedly when I said his name. His face turned pale, and even his lips lost color, as if he had been plunged into icy water. What? What do you mean? Riley spun around to face him with such force that it seemed to cut through the air. But their eyes never met. Sebastian awkwardly turned away, avoiding her gaze. Say something. Didn't you say you only loved me? Sebastian kept his lips tightly shut. His body language screaming, I don't want to talk because it's inconvenient. He had cheated, tried to cover it up. And had no intention of apologizing or showing guilt. What a terrible person. I narrowed my eyes at Sebastian, wishing I could go back in time and warn myself to avoid him. He had deceived not just me but my sister as well, planning to discard us both. That's a lie. You're just saying that because you're upset that I took Sebastian. Right? Isn't that right? Riley pressed Sebastian, trying to force a smile. Her voice and expression were filled with a desperate plea, hoping it wasn't true. But Sebastian remained silent, his head hanging low. His silence confirmed everything, and Riley clutched her head in disbelief. To drive the point home, Sebastian's parents handed her several photos. It's not a lie. We have proof. Look at these. What is this? They're all of Sebastian. Riley stared at the photos, her eyes wide with shock. The photos showed Sebastian walking arm in arm with different women, clearly on dates in a bustling nightlife area. Each photo featured a different woman, proving he had multiple mistresses. Some photos even showed them embracing openly on the streets. Do you see now? You are just one of many mistresses. No. This is fake. These photos must be doctored. Riley screeched, throwing the photos to the floor. They scattered at Sebastian's feet, forcing him to see them. Tell me it's a lie. Say it isn't true. Riley grabbed Sebastian's arm, shaking him. But he stayed silent. Her desperate voice echoed through the room. A stark contrast to her earlier smug demeanor. That's karma. You tricked people, and now you're facing the consequences. I said softly, my words reaching Riley's ears despite her frenzy. Her face twisted in rage. What did you say? You all think you can mock me? She ground her teeth and clenched her fists, stomping toward me with loud, deliberate steps, raising her hand to strike. Don't mess with me. But before she could land a punch, the venue staff restrained her. Let go of me! She flailed her arms and legs, shouting. The staff dragged her out of the venue. Her screams of "I'll never forgive you," echoing even after the doors closed. The intensity of her voice was astonishing. Once her voice faded, I took a deep breath and looked around the room. The atmosphere was thick and heavy, like a cloudy day. The guests had mixed reactions. Some looked at me with sympathy, while others glared at Sebastian with reproach. I picked up the microphone again and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply sorry for causing such a disturbance." People who had been looking at Sebastian turned their attention to me. I apologize for causing such chaos on what should have been our wedding day. The eyes of the gathered guests were all on me. Normally, today should have been a day filled with looks of happiness and congratulations. A short while ago, I never would have predicted that those looks would turn into confusion and pity. With these thoughts, I continued speaking. I realize that this should have been resolved privately between the parties involved. But I couldn't forgive the two who cheated. The betrayal by my sister, who was once my cherished family, and by Sebastian, whom I loved, brought me unbearable pain. I wanted them to regret it for the rest of their lives. The thought of them living carefree despite their betrayal made my blood boil. As I revealed my feelings, the guests' eyes turned to Sebastian. Cold as ice. Under their icy stares, Sebastian crumpled to the ground and, in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "I am truly sorry." After that, Sebastian was fired from his job. Not because the affair was discovered, but because it came to light that he had been engaged in illegal activities. It was true that he had worked hard to turn around a struggling company. This was a fact. But his methods were fraudulent. Instead of honest hard work, he engaged in illegal dealings. Initially, he had no intention of committing fraud. Despite knowing it was wrong, he continued, believing it was for the company's sake. "You're the rising star, the one who's turning things around. Wow, you're amazing. I hope I can boost our performance like you." With all the praise and expectations, he couldn't bring himself to confess to fraud. Caught in a web of deceit, he continued his illegal activities. "I'm not doing anything wrong. It's all for the company. Everything's fine. Everyone's counting on me," he would tell himself. But inside, the fear of being exposed and the consequences of his actions grew larger. Sebastian turned to cheating to distract himself from these fears. In the end, both his infidelity and fraud were exposed, and he lost everything. If he hadn't committed these wrongdoings from the start, none of this would have happened. Words of regret slipped from my mouth with a sigh. In the empty room, they fell unanswered. Sebastian lost the trust of his in-laws, colleagues, and everyone around him, and he was mentally crushed. The admiring glances turned into cold, sharp stares, and he couldn't bear it. He withdrew into himself, regretting his actions, and apologized to his in-laws and everyone else, but no one forgave him. Naturally, he also reached out to apologize to me. "I'm truly sorry for what I did. Please forgive me." But I, too, did not forgive him. Ignoring his repeated messages, I eventually deleted his contact information because it became an eyesore. Without any warm responses from anyone, Sebastian will live the rest of his life in loneliness. My sister Riley also quit her job. The affair had spread throughout the company, and she couldn't stand the disdainful looks from her colleagues. Coupled with the shock of being deceived by Sebastian, she was in no state to work and chose to resign. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please help me." I received such messages from her more than once or twice. Now, finally, an apology. I remembered how she didn't apologize even once on the day of the wedding. I am grateful for everything she did to raise me. Without her, I wouldn't have grown up to be who I am. I know she worked hard every day to support me. But even putting aside the debt of gratitude, I couldn't forgive what she did. I no longer saw her as family. "Goodbye, sis," I whispered, and deleted her contact information from my phone. A tear trickled down my cheek. I had lost my fiancé to my dear sister, and now I had no one I could call family. The overwhelming sadness turned into tears that flowed freely. I hoped I could eventually overcome this sorrow. Clutching my aching chest, I wiped away the tears with my hand. Despite the immense shock from Sebastian and Riley's betrayal, I was gradually recovering. Time played a part, but the support of my in-laws was significant. Throughout the wedding fiasco, they had stood by me, protecting me. "Ava, don't push yourself too hard." My in-laws frequently checked in on me, visiting my home and sending me kind messages. Their gentle words gradually healed my wounded heart. They sent vegetables and rice, took me out for meals, and reminded me of my own parents. "We may not be related by blood, but we care for you as if you were our own daughter. So, please rely on us whenever you need to." Their words were so kind that they made me want to cry. Unable to hold back, tears rolled down my cheeks. This whole ordeal seems to have made me much more emotional. But this time, they were warm tears, unlike the ones shed when I deleted my sister's contact. They were tears of joy, not sadness. I had thought I had no one left to call family. But that wasn't true. My in-laws, who had always been my allies, were there for me. Though not related by blood, we had formed a strong bond, like family. I hoped to repay them one day. With that thought, I took a new step forward. I totally forgot I had a spa appointment today. Walk to the hospital, will you? Come on, hurry up and get out. If you don't get out yourself, I'll make you get out. My granddaughter Avery and I were confused, both of us delirious with high fever. On a snowy day, we had both come down with a fever. We were in the car, being driven to the clinic by my daughter-in-law Riley, after pleading with her. We couldn't understand Riley's words and were unable to stand up from our seats in the car. Apparently, she didn't like that. Riley came around to the back seat and literally dragged Avery and me out of the car. Now the nuisances are gone. Just make it to the clinic on your own, she said, laughing as she drove away. Mom, did she really just abandon us? Even in such a situation, Avery still saw her as her mother. Even before this incident, Avery had been mistreated by Riley. She kept all the harassment from us adults, acting bravely. But when you're sick, your true feelings come out. In her feverish delirium, Avery teared up as she watched the car driving away. We had been enduring Riley's mistreatment for a while, but this was the last straw. I managed to make a call from the hospital to a certain person. I am Mila Smith. I retired last year and am a 60-year-old housewife working part-time. Until 6 months ago, I lived with my husband in a small house. But then, my husband suddenly passed away from an illness. Just 2 months after it was discovered. It was such a sudden event, both my son Theo and I had a hard time accepting it as reality. Especially me, as I had been with my husband since middle school. We were practically one. Right after he passed, I couldn't even eat. Clearing out his belongings in our home, I couldn't stop crying and made little progress. Occasionally, Theo would come over to help me. Gradually, I accepted reality and finished organizing the house. That's when Theo suggested I live with him and his family. But you have a wife, so I'll pass. Theo married around the age of 30. His wife, Riley, 2 years younger than him, was a stay-at-home mom. They met at work, and it was Riley who made the first move. Theo was impressed by her passionate approach, and after dating for about 6 months, they had a quick wedding. Riley, who quit her job for marriage, soon had their daughter, Avery. Riley truly loves Theo. I didn't see her often, but it was clear from her actions how much she cared for him. Perhaps that's why she wanted to keep her distance from us. Riley and Theo had bought a condo about an hour's drive from our house and lived there. But Theo always cared greatly for his parents. He even bought me a fridge for my birthday once. Not just that, he would take me and his family on trips for mine and my husband's wedding anniversary. From an outsider's perspective, he's a son with strong family ties. We didn't spoil our kids in every way, you know. We always made sure to praise them when they did well, and we didn't hesitate to scold them when they did something wrong or bad. Even after getting married, we told Theo not to feel obligated towards us but to prioritize Riley and their family. However, Theo always said, Riley is so understanding. She always supports me, and never changed his behavior. But I guess Riley had her grievances with Theo. Whenever it was just us women, she would indirectly say things that felt hostile. She never did anything direct like breaking things, but I worried that something might happen if we spent too long together. Theo is a good kid, but he's not great at picking up on things. Maybe Riley finds this convenient, as she always behaves like a gentle and kind woman in front of Theo. I guess they get along fine that way. Honestly, because of these circumstances, I had some reservations about moving in with them. Living alone can be tough, right? Besides, Riley and Avery are all for living together. With my granddaughter Avery around, I probably wouldn't be alone with Riley too often. And it's unlikely she'd do anything in front of Theo. Avery is a cheerful kid, more like Theo in personality. And she's quite fond of me. Holding on to a faint hope, I nodded my agreement. All right. I'll be careful not to be a bother. I'd like to live with you all. You're more than welcome. We've got a room ready for you. Since I wasn't giving up my own home, I only needed to pack the essentials. So, I moved in with them, leaving my most treasured items at my own house. But my faint hope was quickly shattered. After I moved in, Riley started harassing me, especially when Theo wasn't around. She'd open packages that were delivered for me, eat the ice cream I bought without asking. And sometimes she wouldn't wash my laundry. You're capable of doing it yourself, so please do. And buy your own detergent. If I tried to use the dryer, she'd get angry about the wasted electricity. I reluctantly started separating my laundry into a different basket. And Theo? He didn't notice a thing. In fact, he thought I was doing these chores voluntarily. Probably because he wasn't home much and left all the housework to Riley. Riley, in front of Theo, would actively take care of Avery, so their household seemed to function well enough. But for me, this life was stifling. I debated many times whether to tell Theo or to leave the house. But I figured if I just put up with it, everything would be fine. I didn't come here to break up a family that has a child. Instead of talking to Theo, I started keeping a diary of my unspoken thoughts. I detailed everything that happened, in case I needed evidence in the future. Using a voice recorder might have been more concrete evidence. But I didn't want to escalate things, so I didn't go that far. It's frustrating, but I'm living under their roof. I decided to put up with it until things settled down. That was until I saw Riley mistreating Avery. I caught her taking Avery's stuffed animal doll and throwing it in the trash. It didn't seem like discipline or teaching. Theo has always been fond of kids, and he adores his daughter Avery to no end. Almost like she can do no wrong in his eyes. He regularly buys her whatever she wants, like the stuffed toy that was just thrown away. There was no indication that Avery had been misbehaving, so I asked her, Avery, what happened? It's always like this. Always? When Dad's here, nothing happens. But when he's gone, she becomes like a monster. It's scary. That bad? Sometimes there's no food, and she ripped the clothes Dad bought for me, saying it's because I'm a bad kid. It seems like Riley is jealous of Avery, too. It's obvious to me how much Theo cherishes Riley. The engagement and wedding rings he bought for her were from the expensive brand she wanted, costing over $10,000 in total. He never misses giving her gifts for birthdays or anniversaries. Still, it seems Riley feels she's not his number one priority. In front of Theo, she acts like a good mother, but when he's not around, she's like a dictator. When I'm with Dad, Mom is so nice and buys me everything. But I'm scared of getting her angry, so please keep what I said a secret. Avery is just in 2nd grade this year. Such a young child, and she's been bearing this all alone. Why didn't I realize sooner? This isn't a problem that can be solved just by me enduring it. I regret that I was too caught up in my own problems. The day I witnessed the harassment, Theo came home from work late, after 11 p.m. I decided to talk to him the next day. But unfortunately, he had to leave on an emergency business trip. There was a big trouble, and he didn't have time for a conversation. While Theo was away, Riley was inviting friends over to our house almost every day. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess. Her friends didn't seem to find anything odd about Riley's behavior. She was doing whatever she wanted, hosting parties at the house every day. During this time, neither Avery nor I had meals prepared for us. And the harassment towards me intensified. I wanted to call Theo about Avery, but I had to wait for the right moment. However, Riley seemed to sense my intentions. Don't report to Theo, please. It would make my position even worse. Riley took away both my smartphone and Avery's kid's phone. I couldn't find where she hid them, so I couldn't get them back. There's a landline at my own house, but I don't know Theo's cell number. Plus, Riley spends a lot of time at home, and I feel like I'm under surveillance. Escaping isn't easy, and it wouldn't solve anything if I left without Avery. I need to find a way to save her. I'm getting anxious. Right now, Riley is neglecting us. I'm using my own money to buy food and cook for Avery. I'm doing all our laundry, and I even walk Avery to her extracurricular activities. I'm handling everything from taking out the trash to cleaning up. Still, with Riley throwing parties every day, if I miss even one day of cleaning, the house starts to smell. Avery, with her chronic bronchial issues, needs regular visits to a major hospital. Sometimes she needs tests like X-rays or blood work, which means long hours at the hospital. I'm the one accompanying her and listening to the doctors.
Grandma, are you pushing yourself too hard?
I'm fine, honey. Grandma's here to take care of you. Yeah. I just wish Dad would come home soon. Seeing Avery tear up like that, I felt an urgent need to resolve this situation. It's only been 2 months since I moved in. I quit my part-time job when I moved, and I'm not part of any community groups like a senior center. With my smartphone taken away, I have no way to contact anyone. Right now, I have nobody to talk to about this. I don't even know how long Theo's business trip will last. It's the beginning of a period of despair. 2 months into this life, in February. Perhaps due to global warming, this year has been marked by extreme temperature fluctuations. I think the mental stress is a factor, but both Avery and I have been unwell. Avery has missed school occasionally, but she says school is better than home. And keeps going. Then came the day of a once-in-a-decade snowstorm. Feeling unwell from the day before, I woke up with a fever of 102 degrees Fahrenheit. It wasn't just me, Avery also seemed to have a fever and was struggling even to get up. We didn't have any fever reducers or pain relievers at home. It might be a seasonal epidemic. And I've heard it's risky to use over-the-counter fever reducers in such cases. We need to get to a pediatrician or a general practitioner. Riley has known about our health issues and has done nothing so far. I don't expect her to do anything this time either. The nearest hospital is about a 10-minute walk. Though Avery is only in 2nd grade, she's a bit taller than her peers. And I'm over 60 now. Even though I've never been seriously injured, it's physically demanding. If only I wasn't down with a fever. But wishing doesn't change reality. Somehow, I managed to convince Riley to let me use the landline to call a taxi. But because of the heavy snow, all the taxis were out, and they couldn't dispatch one for us. With no way to tell how long it would take, we were refused service. How can I get Avery to the hospital? I had no choice but to ask Riley for help. After much deliberation, I decided to go with that plan.
Please, Riley, can you drive us to the hospital?
I pleaded with Riley. She looked contemplative for a moment before saying, "Okay, I will. But you know, asking me for a favor means you owe me something in return, right?" Basically, she was saying if she's going to act like a taxi, I need to pay her. There could be something seriously wrong with Avery. If paying her is what it takes, I have no choice but to go along with it.
It's not much, but will this do?
I handed over all the money I had in my wallet, $100, to Riley. It must have been less than she expected, as her face showed clear displeasure. It's no wonder the amount was small. I had quit my part-time job. And despite this, I was covering the expenses for Avery that Riley didn't pay. This $100 was significant for me, but I had no choice. Riley, still looking unsatisfied, put the money firmly into her wallet. "Well, all right. Hurry up and get ready," she said, reluctantly agreeing to take us. I was worried her mood might change any minute. I quickly got Avery, who was very weak, ready, and we got into the car. Because of the rush, I was still in my pajamas. Riley just stared at her phone the whole time we were getting ready. As we set off in the blinding white snow, I could feel the tension in her rough driving. Halfway to the hospital, the car came to an abrupt stop.
What's wrong? Did something break?
I just remembered, I have a spa appointment today. Walk the rest of the way to the hospital, will you? Come on, get out quickly.
If you don't get out yourself, I'll make you get out.
Avery and I, both delirious with high fever, were confused. We couldn't understand what Riley was saying and couldn't get up from the car. Apparently, she didn't like that. Riley came around to the back seat and literally dragged Avery and me out of the car. Now the nuisances are gone. Just make it to the hospital on your own, she said, laughing as she drove away.
Mom, did she really just abandon us?
Even in such a situation, for Avery, Riley was still her mother. With tears in her unfocused, feverish eyes, Avery watched the car drive away. Avery, let's get to the hospital first. We'll figure out something about your mom. I might not have been very convincing, as I hadn't been able to do much until then. But that was all I could offer her at the moment. I was fighting back tears of guilt and helplessness. Supporting each other, we somehow managed to walk to the hospital. Mom. Even while receiving N4 treatment, Avery talked about Riley. Why does my young granddaughter have to suffer like this? My patience had reached its limit. Fortunately, it was the hospital Avery regularly visited, so they agreed to admit her. Life in the hospital was more restful than at home. I realized then how much I had been on edge. After a bit of mental and physical recovery, we were ready to be discharged. It had been 3 days. Returning home, Riley was visibly shocked to see us. Seriously? You're alive? While thinking what a terrible thing to say, I instinctively hid Avery behind me.
Yes, we got proper treatment at the hospital.
The worst. I kicked you out to avoid making this place a scene of an accident. It would have been better if you'd disappeared. Riley looked down on us with a disdainful expression. Her surprise at seeing only us return turned into shock when someone else appeared.
Riley, what are you saying?
The person who came up behind us was Theo.
Theo, why are you here?
During our hospital stay, I had called a particular person. It was Theo. As Avery's regular hospital had Theo's cell number for emergencies, I asked the hospital to let me call him to report our admission. They allowed it, considering our blood relation. It seemed Riley had been regularly updating Theo. But she hadn't mentioned our ill health. She told him she was handling all the household chores. It's been cold lately. You two rest up. Can Riley take over for you? Riley isn't here.
Why not? Did she already leave?
Riley was supposed to bring us, but she kicked us out of the car. I told Theo everything about how Riley had been treating us, not sparing any details. I reported how she harassed both Avery and me and hadn't done any household chores since Theo left on his business trip. I can't believe Riley would do such things, but if you say so, it must be true. I'll hurry back, just wait a little longer. Initially, Theo had denied what I said. But as I kept talking fervently, he seemed to realize it was serious. However, he needed to see evidence with his own eyes to be convinced. I strongly urged him to come and see the situation himself and asked him to take some time off work. As promised, Theo managed to finish his work early and returned home temporarily.
Riley, what's all this about? Explain everything. Is what you just said really how you feel? It's not true. That was just a joke.
Mom, let's stop this now. Avery, who had been quietly observing our argument, spoke up. Through tears, she started recounting the treatment she had received from Riley. Though she stumbled over her words at times, the harshness of her experiences was too much for a grade schooler.
I can't believe this. I didn't think she was that kind of person. It's not true. Avery, stop lying.
Theo, usually gentle, had a tense expression. He rushed to comfort Avery, who continued to cry. Ignoring Riley, who kept denying everything, I took out my diary. Here's the proof.
This is all your handwriting, right? You made it all up. In fact, I'm the one who's been harassed. Please believe me, Theo.
Riley clung to Theo's arm, crying. Without a glance at Riley, Theo began reading my diary. There's more proof. Come inside. I regretted not having bought a voice recorder. But it was too late to turn back now. I had to show more concrete evidence, or Riley might twist things in her favor. I let Theo into the house, half believing I had some physical proof. My intuition was correct. It seemed Riley had thrown another party at home yesterday. The living room was littered with empty alcohol cans and leftover food packages. With us having been away for 3 days, there was a slight odor too.
So, everything Avery and Mom said is true. This is just a one-time thing. I couldn't clean up.
Riley, let's get a divorce. I'll take care of Avery. Theo's decision to bring up divorce. Without listening to Riley's excuses was a clear indication of his feelings. Riley, faced with the prospect of divorce, couldn't accept it. No, I won't let you go, she cried like a child, unable to have a rational conversation. Theo quickly called Riley's parents to explain the situation. The call was on speakerphone, so we could hear her parents' reactions. They sounded very shocked, followed by what seemed like a sigh. They apologized profusely before hanging up. You can imagine that Riley wasn't in a state to have a coherent conversation right then. Riley remained inconsolable, repeatedly apologizing to Theo but never explaining anything to us. It was clear we couldn't stay there forever. The 3 of us, excluding Riley, decided to start living in my house. Theo, unable to let go of his feelings, tried to talk to Riley several times. But she just kept denying everything.
I didn't do anything wrong.
It made me angry all over again. She wasn't always bad. I would have reconsidered if she changed her attitude, but... With no change in her behavior, Theo decided to go through with the divorce. The divorce was finalized through lawyers since a conversation with Riley was impossible. Avery initially resisted the idea. Mom is so pitiful. Dad should stay with her. Despite the harassment she had faced. Probably because Riley behaved well in Theo's presence. That little bit of sweetness was hard to forget. In a way, maybe Riley was pitiable too, her life changing dramatically after meeting Theo. Hearing Avery's words, I felt pity for Riley for the first time, beyond just anger. But Theo and I always showed Avery love. Living without fear of others' faces is surely more peaceful for Avery. Adjusting to life in our house and feeling safe away from her mother, Avery gradually decided to distance herself from Riley. Theo could have sought child support and alimony but chose not to, unable to cut ties completely. Since Riley was a stay-at-home wife with no savings or income, there were no financial claims made, and the divorce was solely based on other grounds. Riley's parents, having received the news from Theo, flew in from their remote countryside home, which took some time due to the distance. After the divorce was finalized, Riley was taken back by her parents to be cared for at their home. They came to us directly to apologize for the trouble caused. Especially to me, they offered cash as a form of reparation. According to Riley's parents, she seemed to have suffered a mental breakdown after separating from Theo. Since her student days, she had a tendency to become deeply involved in relationships. There had been several instances where she had caused trouble or harassed her partners. Each breakup led to her being deeply depressed and often confined herself at home. As she matured and her life outside of personal relationships became more fulfilling, she appeared to have stabilized mentally. That was when she met Theo and fell in love. Theo, being kind-hearted, always tried to keep her reassured. However, she was displeased with his kindness towards others. All these factors culminated in the current situation. With her parents' help, she started visiting a psychiatrist. But she was struggling to recover, mostly staying in her room. Hospitalization was considered, but for now, she was being closely monitored at home. All contact information for Theo was deleted on the doctor's advice. And Theo also deleted hers, meaning they would no longer be in contact. I declined to accept the reparation money, asking them to use it for Riley's treatment instead. Theo seemed unaware of Riley's current state. We, as parents, debated whether to inform him. But Theo and Avery might not want to be reminded of it. Especially for Avery, who might blame herself, saying, "If only I wasn't there." The scars Riley had inflicted on her during her childhood were still profound. We decided to keep it between us, the parents. Living with Theo and Avery started, and it hasn't been a burden at all. I feel sorry that Avery had to change schools. But she says it doesn't bother her. Theo tries to finish work early and come home. I haven't resumed my part-time job, instead joining a local exercise club for seniors. This incident made me realize the importance of engaging with the community. And I've made acquaintances in the neighborhood. Now, I'm living modest but happy days with my beloved son and granddaughter.
Hey, how much of your dad's inheritance am I gonna get?
My husband callously tossed these greed-filled words over my shoulder. It was just after the funeral of my only family member, my father, who had died suddenly. Without offering any consolation to me in my grief, my husband casually started talking about money. My father was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media, and he must have earned a considerable amount. In the beginning, my husband and I got along well, and he never showed any desire for my father's status or wealth. However, within a few months, he started behaving strangely. He stopped doing household chores, slacked at work, and began receiving poor evaluations from his company. He spent every night out drinking, often showing up at work hungover, and eventually, he even started taking unauthorized absences. I guess he was complacent because of my father's money. Now, with my father's death, he had finally shown his true colors. His attitude, trampling on my sadness and my feelings for the deceased, filled me with a sorrow so intense I wanted to scream, along with a deep, rising anger. Lying face down on the bed, I didn't even look at him as I said, "There's no inheritance. I was my late mother's stepchild. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. $0. My husband's face turned pale.
Lies. A stepchild? What's that about? I've never heard such a thing.
As I spoke calmly, he suddenly yelled so loudly it echoed through the room.
You tricked me. I was expecting an inheritance since your father was a famous lawyer. Marrying an ugly hag like you was a waste. I'm gonna divorce you right away.
He yelled furiously, smashing everything on the table to the floor. Stuffed animals from our pair, our wedding photo in its frame, a mirror we bought on a trip, all our memories shattered into pieces with loud noises. Was this the true feeling of the man I loved and shared so many happy times with when we first met? Mixed feelings of disappointment and disillusionment overwhelmed me, and I collapsed, powerless. I couldn't let my husband see the uncontainable smile. My name is Taylor. I'm 36 years old and work for a cosmetics manufacturer. My husband's name is John. He's 5 years younger than me, and we met at an Spanish conversation class. My husband and I both work in sales for different companies, and we are restudying Spanish to keep up with the recent globalization. My father, a famous lawyer who frequently appeared in the media, was known as Must Consult Smith Attorney. His sales and assets appeared to be quite substantial. Since my family was never featured in the media, my existence wasn't widely known, but still, many people around me, neighbors, acquaintances, friends, and colleagues, often talked about my father. With my father being wealthy, many misunderstood that I was financially comfortable and approached me for money. By my 20s, I was already fed up with this situation. I had a few boyfriends by then, but all of them were ultimately after my father's wealth, asking to be introduced to him or expecting financial support if we got married. It was always about my father. No one saw me for who I am. John, who aggressively pursued me when I was feeling this way, always talked about our French lessons or daily life. He never brought up my father, and when we talked about our families, he acted normally.
Maybe he didn't know about my father. He always seemed genuinely happy talking to me, and we enjoyed simple pleasures like dining at reasonably priced restaurants and going to theme parks, like any normal couple. Just being with Taylor makes me really happy. Seeing your smile beside me fills me with joy. I respect you for not slacking off in work, hobbies, or self-improvement. In John's apartment, as we shared a delivered pizza, he said to me, "I want to enjoy lots of things with you. Would you go out with me?" I had gradually opened my heart to him over our dates, and his words warmed my heart. This man sees me. With him, we can support each other in life. Tears blurred my vision, and the pizza in my mouth tasted suddenly salty but somehow sweet. Thank you. I'm also very happy with you. Yes, I'd like that. John tenderly supported my back as I couldn't stop crying. He never took me to fancy restaurants counting on my money, nor did he ever show any interest in valuing my house like appraising it. Finally, I found simple happiness in our small apartments, sharing easy meals or a delivery pizza. Filled with a sense of security, I instinctively hugged him. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and he never showed any interest in my family home. After 3 years of a perfectly normal relationship, we were engaged. Of course, if we were getting married, we had to meet each other's parents. I was pretty nervous about inviting him to my family home. Since he seemed unaware of who my father was, I feared he might be scared away. When my father came to meet us in the living room and introduced himself, John was shocked.
Wait, are you the Must Consult Smith attorney who appears on TV every week?
John's mouth fell open in surprise, and my father laughed heartily.
Haha. Yes, that's me. You're the first to date my daughter without knowing that. What a surprise!
John apologized profusely, bowing to my father. I'm sorry. I was clueless. Taylor never told me properly. I haven't taken her to nice places on our dates. I apologize for being rude to both your daughter and you. My father, with an unceasing smile, reassured him.
It's okay. You're dating and marrying my daughter, not me. Her life is hers. Don't worry about me. What's important is that you two support each other and have a life where you both feel happy.
My father's demeanor, calm yet dignified, reflected his life experiences as a lawyer handling various challenging cases and his extensive media work. His profound humanity was palpable. Inspired by my father's words, John's eyes sparkled, and he straightened his back.
Yes, I might not reach your level of success, being younger and less reliable, but I'll do my best to make your daughter happy.
My father looked at us warmly. And a few months later, we had our wedding and registered our marriage. Despite some relatives saying the wedding was modest for a famous lawyer's daughter, it was our wish to have a small, lovely ceremony with close family. We moved to an apartment to start our married life. We lived modestly and happily together. We both quit our Spanish conversation classes to save money, but I've been practicing my Spanish through work projects with overseas clients. John, seemingly unchanged, continued to work diligently in sales. I wondered what kind of life we would lead together. I wanted to travel and someday have children. I was looking forward to a happy future. I thought about this. But I began to wonder if I was the only one with these thoughts. A few months into our marriage, I started to notice a change in John's behavior. At first, John used to diligently help with household chores during nights and weekends, but recently, he doesn't even bother to take care of his own stuff. He leaves his clothes strewn about, his dirty dishes on the table instead of in the sink. Before, he would have promptly gone shopping when we ran out of everyday items, but now he just roughly tells me, "Hey, we're out of milk." What surprised me the most was his reckless spending. He used to be frugal, only splurging on Spanish classes for self-improvement. And he chose affordable places to eat and hang out. The joy was special when he splurged a bit on anniversaries. But now, he casually buys expensive watches and books reservations at fancy 3-star restaurants, places we've never even been to together, even when it's not a special occasion. When I confronted him about his spending, saying, I understand wanting to indulge, but are we okay money-wise? He just shrugged it off with, I'm married now. I gotta live it up a bit, right? Even when I warned him about saving for our future children and how his extravagant spending was troubling, his response was too carefree, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. I was frustrated with his irresponsible attitude. And then came the winter bonus season. My bonus hadn't changed much, perhaps a slight increase due to my hard work. But John's bonus was shockingly a digit less. He looked bitter, admitting it was about a third of the previous year. I hadn't heard of any significant downturn in his company or industry. So it was clear that the issue was with him. You've been coming home late after nights out, sometimes hungover at work, and even oversleeping and being late, right? Maybe that's affecting your work. I asked him cautiously. The point was that his attitude towards his work had become lax since we got married. It was evident from his day-to-day attitude that his work ethic had become lax. It was hard to believe that a husband constantly late due to his nightlife could be performing well at work. Maybe. The company's been tough, but I guess my next bonus will be back to normal. Despite my concern, he said it as if it were someone else's problem. His indifference was alarming, showing no intent to change his lifestyle or recover from the reduced bonus. Then, just a few weeks later, John didn't go to work. He had been out late the night before, and despite my attempts to wake him, he wouldn't get up. I left for work, saying, I'm not dealing with this, but he never got up and went to work. He didn't even call in sick and just stayed in bed all day. When I came home and saw him still in bed, I was shocked. Did you just skip work without notice? His behavior was unacceptable, both as a husband and a professional. I couldn't wake up. I called in sick after the office reached out. Unbelievable. His company had to call because he didn't show up. And he showed no remorse for the trouble caused or the gap in his work. I felt hopeless about this changed man, so different from the person I married.
Do you realize what you've done? Your performance evaluation is down, you're always hungover or oversleeping, and now this unexcused absence. What if you get fired?
I was so worried about his future, our future, that I couldn't help but raise my voice. What John said next left me speechless. Then we can just borrow money from your dad, right? In that moment, everything went dark before my eyes. When did John become the kind of man who relies on my father's wealth? He promised my father he'd help me find happiness together. He said he was happy just being with me, enjoying a modest life. How foolish I was to believe I could be happy with him. Now, it's all about the money. Just like those in my past. Why do people always get blinded by money? Was it a mistake to introduce him to my father before we got married? I was overwhelmed with disappointment, regret, sadness, and various other emotions. If this continues, I might even consider divorce. John didn't change his behavior after that. He received a stern warning from his company and stopped taking unauthorized absences, but he didn't stop his flashy nightlife or wasteful spending. When he impulsively bought expensive brand shoes and bags without thinking, I felt fear about what would become of him. As I worried about my own life, months passed by. Then one day, my father suddenly passed away. It wasn't an accident or incident, but a sudden illness. Of course, his work colleagues and the media were in an uproar, and everything around me became busy instantly. I had lost my mother long ago and had no siblings. My father was my only family. I was too busy to even cry until after the funeral, but once everything settled, I was overwhelmed with a sense of loss and sadness. My father, always calm and wise despite his busy career in media work, raised me alone and had always been my role model. Whenever I felt like giving up during exams or job hunting, I was encouraged by his dedication and willingness to learn. He was only 66, too young to die. As I was grieving in my room, John barged in without knocking. He hardly helped with the funeral arrangements, just idly playing with his phone while I was busy handling everything. I was already resigned to his behavior and couldn't muster the energy to scold him. As I sat crying on my bed, He stood there without even squatting down to my level and asked, "Hey, how much is the inheritance?" It's all about the money again. I was too fed up to answer, but he came closer and shouted,
"How many millions? He must have left a fortune, right? You're his only kin, so the inheritance comes to us, right?"
His face bore a disgusting, greedy smile. Thinking he'd become a millionaire overnight now that my father was gone. He dreamt of a lavish life without working, and his drooling, despicable face filled me with revulsion. I told him without even looking at him, "There's no inheritance." He immediately yelled back,
"That can't be true. He just died suddenly, he couldn't have spent it all."
"It's not that. I was a stepchild of my late mother. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. $0. Just as I told him, I have no blood relation to my respected father. My father never publicized our family in the media, perhaps for this very reason.
Lies. A stepchild? What's that? I've never heard this story before.
He raised me until I became an adult, and we both cared for each other deeply. My mother passed away a long time ago. I just thought there was no need to mention it. There's nothing more to say to John." Instead of telling him to leave, I just sighed, and then he suddenly yelled so loudly it echoed through the room.
"You tricked me. Why do you think I've been sucking up to you and your father all these years? Give me back my last few years."
"What?" I was stunned for a moment. What did he just say? Before I could ask, he started smashing everything on the table to the floor in a tantrum. Our couple's stuffed animals, the photo frame from our wedding, a mirror we bought on a trip, all our memories shattered with loud noises.
"You're so stupid, you probably thought I was a prince who fell for you without knowing anything about your father, right? It was all an act. A girl from our Spanish class recognized you and secretly told me everything. She said you'd probably been approached by guys after your father's money, so if I pretended not to know and played the pure love angle, you'd fall for it easily."
I couldn't believe it. Unlike school or work, there's no need to expose one's identity in a hobby class, so I let my guard down. Since he never mentioned anything about my father in our French class, I believed he fell for me without knowing about him. He said I tricked him, but it turns out I was the one who was deceived. John clicked his tongue loudly.
"Damn it. How are you going to make this up to me? My life plan is ruined because of you. I've been acting like a good guy for 3 years, thinking I'd get an inheritance. Who would bother with an ugly old hag like you otherwise?"
He let loose now that his true colors were showing. I was so disillusioned, I had no energy left to argue back, my heart just turned cold.
"I was planning to divorce you once the inheritance was secure. I've been seeing someone for about a year now. I was going to marry her and build a nice house with the money, give her a life of luxury."
His confession of lies and now an affair. I had to react. I looked up, my eyes wide, staring at him. "What did you just say? A year ago?" "That's around the time we decided to get married." "Yes. It's been almost a year since he proposed and we visited my father." "You didn't start the affair because we got engaged, did you?"
"Exactly. Who wouldn't want a young and beautiful partner? I had my eye on this girl for a while. Cute girls cost money, though. I couldn't afford her with my salary, so I had to secure our marriage."
What a cunning plan. He used me and my father for his petty desires. All his nights out with friends or colleagues were probably dates with his affair. My heart pounded with anger, my fingers trembling with heat. My fingertips became hot and began to wince and tremble. Ah, what a loss.
"If there's no money, you're useless to me. We're getting a divorce."
He spat out those words. I turned to him and calmly said,
"Of course. Who needs a man who deceived us and had an affair? Let's get divorced as soon as possible. And since you had an affair, I'll be claiming alimony."
Reacting to the mention of money, he started to rage again. Alimony. I should be the one getting that. I've been the one deceived. And do you have any proof of the affair for the lawyers? Any photos? Recordings? You've got nothing, right? Despite feeling like my insides were boiling, I tried to remain composed as I spoke. You're right. Since I can't produce any evidence, alimony might be difficult. So I won't claim it. There's no inheritance, so there's no property to divide either. Just promise me you'll never involve yourself with me or my family again. That's enough for me. John responded with emotionless eyes. Fine, that works for me. I never want to deal with you again. With that, he left the room, deliberately slamming the door loudly behind him. Later that day, I asked him to sign the divorce papers and a reminder that he would not be involved with me in any way in the future, as we had discussed the day before, and we were easily divorced. Having lost both my father and husband in just a few days, I returned to my family home, feeling empty. My father's presence still lingered in his room, and I cried there once more. After my bereavement leave, I returned to work and started getting used to living alone at my family home. Gradually, my life returned to its peaceful routine. About 2 weeks later, my phone started ringing off the hook all day long. I set it to silent mode at work to avoid disturbing others and kept it in my locker, but at home, the constant calls were a nuisance. The caller was always John. I ignored him for several days, but he was so persistent that I decided to answer just once, hoping it would put an end to his incessant calls. As soon as I pressed the call button, John started yelling from the other side. You really fooled me back then. There must be an inheritance after all. Why didn't you give it to me? His loud, angry voice was so unpleasant that I instinctively moved the phone away from my ear. The TV in the room was broadcasting news. It was about the recently deceased attorney Smith, stating that his substantial inheritance was donated to non-profit organizations by his family. John must have seen this news and realized there was indeed an inheritance, and now he was furious. There was actually a bit of a lie in the story that there was no inheritance to be inherited because there was no blood relation. While I had no blood relation to my father, my parents did formalize an adoption when I was in elementary school. My father, a successful attorney, had prepared a will stating that all his inheritance would go to me. Of course, being drafted by a professional attorney, it was legally sound. When my father passed away, John was already living a wasteful and lazy life. I kept silent about the inheritance to prevent him from squandering it without working. And what about that amount? $4 million. With that money, you could have lived comfortably for the rest of your life. Why did you keep quiet, you idiot? We were already divorced, so he, now a stranger, had no claim to the money. He was furious and regretful for missing out on such a large sum. That's the problem with you. You don't work seriously but are obsessed with other people's money. I wouldn't want to give you a single penny. As I firmly stated this, John made a pitiful noise on the other end. Come on, did you really donate all of it? Didn't you keep a little for yourself? As he continued to be unrelentingly stubborn, I answered. I really donated every single penny. There's no money left from my father. There was an obvious click of his tongue from the other end. You're really stupid. Why would you donate it? You could have had a good life if you kept it. Ah, well. Good thing I divorced a dumb woman like you. With those parting words, John hung up unilaterally. Finally, the storm had passed. I took a deep breath and blocked his number. After that, John, shocked by the loss of the inheritance he had been counting on, started drinking every day, and naturally, his work performance and attitude at his company worsened even more. Furthermore, John's marriage to me for inheritance and our quick divorce after my father's death became known at his company, further lowering his reputation as a person. Meanwhile, I tried using social media on a whim to look into John's mistress and quickly found her account. It seems John had been acting lavishly towards her, counting on my father's inheritance, but now he couldn't afford to treat her well after everything was gone. reading her post saying, "The guy I was dating divorced his wife, but lately he keeps saying he has no money, no gifts, no dinners. I was with him for the luxury, but now I think I'll break up." I held my aching head. It seems John was after our money, and his mistress was after his. They were all money-hungry, classless people. With a straight face, I closed the page, deciding never to look at it again. About 3 weeks after our last phone call, an unexpected visitor came to my office. A staff member came to fetch me, looking troubled, and in the hallway stood a much paler John. "What do you want, showing up at my office?" I asked in a stern voice, and John looked at me with a sycophantic smile, laughing. "After thinking, your bonus went up when mine went down, right? So, you must have some savings, even without your father's inheritance?" I was stunned, not expecting him to bring up my money. "I'm in debt now because of all the shopping and drinking on credit. If this continues, I'll be in trouble. Can you help me out a little? Please?" he pleaded, clasping his hands. Just when I thought he had finally given up on my father's inheritance, he now shamelessly comes asking for my savings. I almost felt dizzy from his audacity. "Of course not," I said directly. "Every time you look at someone, it's money, money, money. I'm so fed up. If you want money that badly, work hard, save, and earn it yourself." Don't make such an ugly face. You're really hideous. Want to know how much I owe? $40,000. The girl I wanted to marry recently dumped me for being stingy. I'm at rock bottom. Can't you help out just a bit? He continued to beg pathetically. He had lost both money and women and was now just pitiful. "That's your own selfish debt. You handle it. It's really a nuisance, so please leave right now." As our voices rose, employees and security guards gathered around. They knew my father and had seen John at our wedding. My boss, who had rushed over, had security guard escort John out, and he assured me he'd make sure John couldn't enter the office again. My boss expressed anger toward my ex-husband, saying, "It's unacceptable that someone as humble and hardworking as you has to suffer because of a terrible husband." He sympathized with me while openly showing his disdain for my ex. Furthermore, he praised my diligent and accurate work performance, assuring me that he would positively influence my next evaluation. John's life, already a mess, worsened as he started being late and absent without notice, eventually getting fired. Without any savings, he couldn't pay his rent or living expenses and ended up homeless. His health declined from excessive drinking, and with his disheveled appearance, he couldn't secure a stable job. He managed to find a live-in part-time job and is slowly paying off his debt. For years, he deceived a woman and flew into a rage when things didn't go his way. Unable to manage himself properly, always taking the easy way out and indulging his whims. Such a self-centered and childish man is now forced to grit his teeth and endure a constrained life. As for me, I still have something hidden from John. The apartment in downtown I'm living in, inherited from my father, is quite valuable. After living here for a while, I plan to sell it when I find a new place or meet a new partner. Also, while I did donate the inheritance as I told John, it wasn't the full amount. My father's will stated, "Feel free to use it, but keep some for yourself too." Knowing my interest in helping children worldwide, my father seemed to have foreseen my donation. I won't betray my dear father. So I kept a quarter of the inheritance for myself. It is $1 million in my account. Of course, I won't use it for brand name items to look good or for fun that has no residual value. I want to use it carefully for my future.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sarah tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sarah y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sarah quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sarah completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sarah se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sarah quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sarah era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Dicen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Dicen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sarah había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sarah llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sarah era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sarah comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, Pren, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre Pren antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Dicen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Listen, primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometí hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara, y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el 3er piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al 7º piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de una hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos dos objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del listen. Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche. Me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado. Dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones, intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre, aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente, Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales, 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco, parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas, había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos, Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento, se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche, no había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta, los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse, no hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marche Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshall no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sarah. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sarah era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sarah, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba, y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marshall. Malcolm Eugene Foote resistió al principio, pero David y Marshall lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sara conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.